Donald Trump is in fact moving forward with this firing of one Lisa Cook, despite the fact that Hakeem Jeffries says you cannot fire her because she's the first black woman to ever sit on that board of Federal Reserve governors, to which everybody's like, I'm sorry, like, aren't we over the DEI stuff? Like, didn't that just end? Right? Like Harvard, they seem to be getting that message. A lot of companies seem to be getting that message. And even ABC News and Disney seems to be getting the message. Not just from Snoop Dogg, who said it on a podcast this week, oh my gosh, I took my kids to see Buzz Lightyear, and suddenly my grandkids, all of a sudden we're having these conversations I never thought we had to have, right? Like, he's even calling them out. But actually, the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, has sent 2 letters. And now ABC News is under investigation. Disney is under investigation. NBC is under investigation for their DEI policies. So I think we're done and over with DEI, which is why you can't, Hakeem Jeffries, say she gets to keep her job, even if she's guilty of mortgage fraud, just because she's the first black woman to be on the board of the Federal Reserve. No, that's not how it works. And by the way, is she guilty or is she not? I mean, I don't get it. She actually hasn't answered any questions on the mortgage fraud. I'm talking about Lisa Cook, ladies and gentlemen. Get to know her. If you haven't seen her before, there she is in all her glory. And, I got to tell you, who found an even better picture? I think it was Roger Stone. He got a real winner. We'll find that one in a second. But she's refusing to step down. All right. She's like, I'm not going anywhere, buddy. This is my job. Biden put me here and I'm staying. Well, it's a little strange because we don't know still exactly what transpired on the mortgage fraud front. I mean, we've seen the documentation. We've seen the paperwork. Here's what's out there, guys. Signatures, okay? You get a couple of signatures here. The Atlanta residents in Georgia, you get the Michigan residents, and they both seem to be primary residences. So would she explain something? Could she explain something? No, her lawyer, who by the way is Letitia James's lawyer, says she's not going to explain anything. It's just that she's not going to step down because she is doing her job just fine, and the president doesn't have the right to fire her. He disagrees. In fact, the president was very vocal over on Truth Social saying, you know what, I do have the right because it is my duty to enforce the law. Here is the letter he sent to her pursuant to my authority under Article 2 of the Constitution of the United States and the Federal Reserve Act of 1917 as amended. You are hereby removed from your position on the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve effective immediately. The Federal Reserve Act provides that you may be removed at my discretion for cause. See Section 12 U.S.C. 242. I've determined that there is sufficient cause to remove you from your position. He goes on and on and on, and then ends it with my favorite. What is it at the end? Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Lisa Cook getting a little bit of a blow there to her. It's like clockwork. I was waiting yesterday because we talked about this story and I was like, where are they? Where are they? Where are all the Democrats? I saw one commentator who used to be on CNBC who went on to MSNBC and said, they're trying to gerrymander the Federal Reserve now. That came out, but I was still waiting. I was like, are we going to get any more? What do you guys think? And it's taken them a while, but I think they've finally pulled their ducks together. They've got their ducks in a row. Now they've decided to come out and defend one Lisa Cook. You ought to hear Paul Krugman, that Princeton economist who also writes for the New York Times and is wrong on just about everything always. Like if he says sell, you buy. If he says buy, you sell. Seriously. Wrong on the market constantly. It's actually gross and irresponsible. But Paul Krugman went on to CNN to say, there's nothing wrong with what she did. Excuse me?
It's really that she did anything wrong, but anything that's being raised pertains to, back when she was a professor at Michigan State, not at the Fed. Normally, firing for cause means that you're drinking on the job or you're stealing office supplies or something like that. It's something related to not doing the job. And there's been no hint of that. Nothing, no one has claimed, even the Trump people aren't trying to claim that she's doing a bad job at the Fed, that she's unqualified or behaving inappropriately. So this is crazy. This is, if I cheated on my third grade exam, should I be fired from my current job? This is completely insane.
Treasury Secretary Bessent commented on the move in today's cabinet meeting. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Okay. I'm sorry, but since when is it like cheating on your third grade exam? Like, if there's actually mortgage fraud, how is that like cheating on your third grade exam? I mean, clearly, Krugman has a whole different set of moral code than the rest of the world. And you know what's really annoying for people? You think about how expensive homes are right now, and part of the reason they're so expensive and people are kind of trapped in them is because interest rates are so high. And so here's this woman who's helping to set the high interest rates, going out there behind the scenes and doing things allegedly to make sure that she gets a better interest rate. How is that fair? Okay, yeah, I told you Roger Stone found the rather unflattering picture of Ms. Cook, Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook is cooked. That's what I said, right? Said her home in Ann Arbor, Michigan was her principal legal residence, getting a state tax break and a lower mortgage and insurance rate. 2 weeks later, she said her home outside of Atlanta was her principal and legal residence, getting a state tax break and a lower mortgage and insurance rate. This is mortgage fraud. Okay, again, Lisa Cook hasn't said anything. Could she tell? Maybe it was an error. Okay, tell us it was an error. Maybe it was that she was moving and like there was this overlap. I'm making stuff up. I'm trying to help you, Lisa, but you haven't told us. Instead, you just get your lawyer out there saying, no, you don't have any reason to fire her. I mean, I'm with Howard on this one. If this is mortgage fraud, you better step down. We don't want you on the Federal Reserve.
But the issue is a federal government, a governor of the Federal Reserve, literally signs her name and commits mortgage fraud, right? It's alleged that she's committed mortgage fraud, and she says, I'm not going anywhere. Well, the crook always says, I'm not going anywhere. And why would anybody defend that? The real question should be, did she commit mortgage fraud, yes or no? And if you did commit mortgage fraud, please get out of the federal government, get out of the seat of the governor of the Federal Reserve, and go away. You don't deserve to be there if you've committed mortgage fraud. Right? It's right, black and white. If you've committed mortgage fraud, you shouldn't be a governor of the Federal Reserve.
Kind of seems obvious, but no. If you ask Krugman, it's just like cheating on your third grade exam, which, by the way, also isn't good. But you understand, like, you really shouldn't be an officer of the Federal Reserve helping to set interest rates if you're out there doing something funny behind the scenes. For goodness sakes, people, come on. Like, you understand, like, they have their own moral code for themselves, and then there's a moral code for everybody else, and it just doesn't fly. It doesn't sit well. Here's the CNN report on it. And just remember, these are the folks, the media, the left. What did they tell us over and over again? No one is above the law. I mean, unless, of course, you happen to be the first black woman on the board of the Federal Reserve Governors, then you get all kinds of passes.
Though, is whether what the president has at this point amounts to cause.
At issue in 2021, Cook purchased a home in Michigan, then another home in Georgia, declaring both to be her primary residence based on a CNN review of mortgage documents, potentially double dipping on financial incentives for home buyers. But analysts note she has denied wrongdoing. She was never charged. That might not be a valid cause to fire her anyway, and she may have an explanation.
She could just say she made a mistake.
However, Trump has been fuming at the Fed for months for refusing to drop interest rates to head off rising inflation.
Yeah, to head off rising inflation. So he's concerned, right? And we've done a lot. I tend to not like to have to see lower rates all the time because there's always a danger of printing money. But this is a different scenario right now. And actually, the world has been changing rather rapidly. And Rob and I have written on this at 76 Research. I encourage you to go to 76research.com, get the 76 report, use code word $DEAL, LLAR. You can get the link in my notes. But the point is that things have changed enough that actually, when the Federal Reserve is out there raising rates, the people it hurts the most are the middle class. Okay, so it's that hourglass economy effect that I talk about a lot. So the people on top, like, they can manage it, right? It doesn't matter. They're paying cash for their homes anyway. The people on the bottom, well, they're not getting mortgages. So it doesn't matter to them. It's the people in the middle that are most affected by that. And what is this country other than middle class? You need a strong, vibrant middle class in order to have a successful America. I mean, look at 2/3 of GDP. is the middle class consumer spending. So it is critical, right, that you have a thriving middle class. And here she is saying we're going to up interest rates. And the irony of it is she's allegedly getting a better interest rate for herself, me, myself, and I. And that's what just doesn't fly. And yet the left, my gosh, they're going to sit there till they're blue in the face, including Elizabeth Warren, trying to say absolutely no reason to fire her. So what? You know, she just cheated on her third grade exam. Who cares if she got another mortgage rate at a sweet plum deal, even though it's fraud, even though it's illegal? Watch.
To the Justice Department, but there's been no charges. I do think there is a question of this matter of cause that the president is talking about here, and whether or not, if it's proven to be true, if that does constitute cause to fire her and remove her from a position that she's slated to hold until the end of 2038.
Look, the legal standard for cause here is failure to do her job. And so it's about inefficiency or malfeasance in office, something that is related to her job. There's case law on this from the past, and clearly that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is that one of Donald Trump's hitmen has access to data, and he's clearly trying to go through Donald Trump's perceived enemies list and see if he can dig up dirt on someone and if it might be enough to help Donald Trump seize control over the Fed. You know, look, Donald Trump has a really serious economic problem. And the economic problem he faces is not the Fed. The economic problem he faces is that he promised, think back to a year ago today, he promised over and over and over that he would lower costs for American families on day one. When he got elected, the question was, why did you get elected? And he said, because I promised to lower costs on day one. Here we are at day 220? And the cost of groceries is up. The cost of utilities is up. The cost of housing is up. The cost of school shoes is up. The cost of baby strollers is up.
Okay. Actually, cost of eggs is way down for what it's worth. In terms of cost, though, you do understand, right, Elizabeth Warren, that when the Fed lowers rates, costs actually often go up, okay, not down. So maybe she missed that little lesson in economics, but typically when the Fed is lowering rates, it means there's more money in circulation. And this is why they don't want to do it, right? Because they're concerned about inflation. And so they resist that. And so the new studies that have come out, and this is what's really fascinating, and Rob and I have written on it, 76 Research, suggest that actually it's exaggerated, that it's actually the QE, the money printing, not to get too analytical here with you, but it's the QE that they engage in and all that money printing that really, really emphasizes that inflation. But you could probably move rates a little bit lower and not have a huge inflationary effect, but rather juice the middle class economy. So what's wrong with that? Anyway, I'll tell you, they're losing it because they just cannot believe that he dared to fire the first black woman who's on the board of the Federal Reserve. They have seven governors, including Jerome Powell. You know, he has no use for Jerome either. And then this lady. But it's not like this lady is the only one who's been out there saying, hey, I'm not willing and ready to lower rates. I mean, they've all been saying that. We saw a little bit more of a dovish tone from Jerome Powell recently out at Jackson Hole. But for the most part, they've been actually in accord. I would say, look, if this is what she did, she should absolutely step down. And it may be within the president's right to fire her. The other thing you got to think about here, this fabulous game of chess, if you would, because the Trump administration is smart. And I told you they had 4 years on the sidelines to think through all of this stuff. Think about the game of chess that's going on, because he's been wanting to get rid of Powell, Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve. And if it turns out, because the Fed is allowing her to stay on, the Fed is saying, okay, they won't say whether or not she was in the office this morning. Maybe she's working from home. You know, it's August. They wouldn't say anything about that. But here's the deal. If Jerome says, hey, I'm going to allow Lisa Cook to stay on in her position and she's allowed to continue voting on interest rates, et cetera, and then the court rules, yes, the president had the power to remove her, then you might actually have a situation where you could fire Jerome Powell. You see where I'm going? For cause. That's a sophisticated game of chess. So Powell right now is letting her stay on. But if the court actually decides she's a real problem, then you could see some trouble up ahead. And, you know, to Elizabeth Warren's point, look, he does have Bill Pulte. People should not be getting secondary mortgages that are what they would call primary mortgages. I'm not even sure how the banks allow this to happen, but there's a whole bunch of them. You got Adam Schiff, right, with his primary residences in Maryland and California. You got Letitia James, primary residence in New York and Virginia, of course, her father signing as her husband. Then you got Lisa Cook. Lisa Cook, primary residences in Georgia and Michigan. I mean, this stuff is coming out to haunt all of them. And they're all acting like it's no big deal, like everybody does this. I'm sorry, not everybody does this. This is really weird. So you save a couple points, and believe me, I'm all about saving money. And you know, a compound interest thing, you put that money into a good stock fund. 76research.com. We're not a fund, actually. We just give you advice on what stocks you might want to be looking at. But you put money into the market, and that adds up over time. But you don't do it illegally, okay? You don't do it by saying, okay, I have 2 primary residences. Again, I don't even know how the banks allow this to happen. Somebody should be looking at the bank saying, what on earth? But the irony of it all, right, is that what did Letitia James use? She tried to use mortgage fraud to go after one Donald Trump. And boy, is it coming back to bite her in the you-know-what. The big you-know-what. Unbelievable stuff. I'll tell you, she deserves it, all of it. She also, interestingly, much like Lisa Cook, when she was asked, hey, what happened? What went down? She won't answer the question, remember?
I will respond to these baseless allegations at the appropriate time and in the appropriate way, but I am 100% confident that it will not result in any criminal indictment or action against me, and that it is nothing more than a revenge tour, and that Donald Trump just ultimately got to the J's, and I was next.
The key allegation, again, it sounds like you don't want to address them here, but I'm just going to put it out so people understand that a property that was owned in Virginia, and a mortgage that you signed, if I'm not mistaken, for that property, that they say you falsely represented yourself as a resident of Virginia, and that was essentially amounts to mortgage fraud since you're a resident of New York. What is your response to that?
It's baseless. Everybody knows I'm a resident of New York, specifically Brooklyn. And again, we will respond at the appropriate time in the appropriate way, to these baseless allegations. And some media outlets like the Daily News over the weekend has indicated as much.
Unbelievable. So in other words, she just didn't want to answer the question. Now keep in mind, she's got the same darn lawyer, Abby Lowell, who actually represented Hunter Biden too. Laptop, remember? Abby Lowell must charge a lot. She's got a $10 million slush fund, by the way, that was approved by Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, to pay Abby Lowell taxpayer money. Like, that's okay, not. So she's got Abby Lowell, and she's not saying what went down. She's not telling us. And nor is the other one, the Cook, also a client of Abby Lowell. So maybe this is a strategy. You're just trying to turn it back onto Trump. I think you guys have some answering to do. I mean, for goodness sakes, even Adam Schiff tried to take this one on. He didn't have much of an answer, but they asked him about his alleged mortgage fraud on Sunday on NBC.
Adam Schiff has engaged in a sustained pattern of possible mortgage fraud. Adam Schiff said that his primary residence was in Maryland to get a cheaper mortgage and rip off America when he must live in California because he was a congressman from California. Now, the government mortgage company, Fannie Mae, says you're, quote, engaged in a sustained pattern of possible occupancy misrepresentation on several loans. Are these allegations true? How do you respond to them?
They're patently false. And the president knows it, in the housing agency, president's person, Pulte, knows it. He's essentially doing the president's bidding against me, against Letitia James, against this person on the Federal Reserve. Mortgage is their new weapon to go after their critics. But I've been very open about my residency, both in California and in Maryland, with my constituents and with the lenders. So there's no there there. But the common denominator is they will manufacture anything to go after their critics, after members of Congress to try to silence them, after John Bolton, after people in the Federal Reserve, after generals, after former presidents. They're investigating Comey and Clapper, the Obamas, the Clintons. Basically, it's free reign with a corrupt leadership at the Justice Department.
Buddy, what do you think you guys did? Okay, like, he didn't start this. You guys started it. In all seriousness. I mean, you think about what you put Donald Trump through and his family through and the country through ever since he won. He beat Hillary Clinton. It was unthinkable. How could it happen? I get it. Obama's ego was bruised. Hillary's ego was certainly bruised. They had to come up with some kind of reason. So suddenly it was, the Russians stole it. The Russians took it. Otherwise, Hillary clearly would have won. Yeah, like people really liked her and wanted to go to the polls and vote for her not. So instead of just saying, okay, we got to double down and figure out where we went wrong. Maybe we're too elitist. Maybe we're too woke. Maybe we have the wrong agenda. Maybe we shouldn't care so much about making sure boys can play in girls' sports. Maybe we actually ought to care about middle-class Americans again. Instead of doing that, you guys just started opening investigation after investigation after investigation to the point where you were going to bankrupt him. That was Letitia's goals. Bankrupt him. I mean, then you think about Fani Willis and her goal. Put him behind bars. She got that mugshot, right? The mugshot that actually backfired completely, spectacularly on Fani and the Dems. Because why? Americans don't really like that. They kind of like Trump, believe it or not. Even the ones that don't like him, they find him kind of funny. He's got a good self-deprecating sense of humor, and it kind of works. And so Adam Schiff, you don't have that. Adam, I'm sorry. I know you wanted to be an actor or producer or something like that, and you wound up being a lawyer, and now you're in the Senate. But you don't have that je ne sais quoi. People don't really like you. I mean, maybe Rachel Maddow. That's not saying much, okay? So you don't have any friends. Nobody likes you. The country's not with you. And you can't figure out why it is that this guy could have possibly won. And so, yeah, he's going to come back after you with everything he's got. Why? Because you impeached him not once, not twice, but 3 times, for goodness sakes. He knows what happens. He knows what happens if the ball is back in your court, and it can't be allowed because of the things that you've done. And you know what? I'm sorry, but somebody's going to have to pay for that because we need to wipe the slate clean and start over again. We need a system that's fair for all players. You can't weaponize things like they did in the Obama administration so as to hurt one Donald Trump coming in. And this is what Tulsi's exposing. And this is what Cash Patel's exposing. It's all coming out, guys. Big time.